personal page first, so I have to like now share it onto the other page because free services. That's why.
Yeah.
So welcome if anybody's joining in quite yet. Well, I'm hoping that you and I can have a good conversation about your comics and my comics and making comics and doing Kickstarters and all of that good stuff. All right, I'm going to share this onto my main page.
I'm sharing mine as well.
Yep. All right, great. And then I'm just going to double check my YouTube and make sure that it's actually...
Bear with us, gang, if you are watching.
Just joining in, the joys of live internet programming.
Video production in its finest.
Yes, exactly, exactly. In the days of the COVID. Where did YouTube go? YouTube. Come on now, YouTube. YouTube and... The test that I ran earlier worked, and in fact that I didn't quite. I know. I think. Yep, it's working. It's working. All right. So yeah, let's get started. I was just flipping through Nightwolf number 4.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I like the cover, by the way.
Yeah, well, I like all the covers, but of course I'm partial to this one. That was a lot of fun. Say again? Oh.
I said, I don't know why you would, though.
I'm only slightly biased. But you've been working with some really great artists. How did you meet everybody?
So let's start with you. We talked a little bit about this last week when we were on your live stream. You and I approached you through Kickstarter because I noticed you had very similar, Kickstarter going on. I love werewolves, and there's not enough of us doing werewolf comics.
Yeah.
So, that's how I met you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Connor Hughes, who is the artist of White Ash, I actually tabled next to him at the Keystone Comic Con. Not this past August, but the August before when we were allowed to be at cons.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he and we hung out all weekend. We had great conversations. I mean, it was like, we hung out, talked like we were having friends. So it was, just him and I just, talking one day, and I said, hey, you interested in doing a variant cover? And he's like, oh yeah, definitely. So they're very thankful for that. Because I know he's busy with White Ash and he's constantly putting out pages for the game and White Ash for Charlie.
Yeah.
And so then, same place actually, I met Joseph Smokey, who is also he does work with Scout as well. He has the Electric Black as his series.
Yeah.
But he also runs an imprint through them. I think Black Canvas is that dark horror imprint that they have.
Okay.
That he, running. But I met him at the same Comic-Con. I seen his stuff online before that, and then I happened to see his banner 2 rows over, and I'm like, I have to go introduce myself to that dude.
Right.
So
right.
I went over and I introduced myself, and I told him that I had a werewolf book, and he's like, dude, I love werewolves.
Nice.
And he was like, who doesn't, right? And I'm like, you'd be surprised how many people at cons would be like, actually, and I introduced myself, and I told him. But yeah, so I reached out to him too, and I was like, hey, would you be interested in doing a cover, And I asked him to do one of my demon characters because he's very good at that dark, demonic-looking art.
Yeah.
Next time around, I'm definitely gonna have him do a werewolf cover. But for this, at this time, I had you lined up, I had Connor, and I said, hey,
right.
Very
Oh, sorry.
It's like, oh,
I'm making sure I can see comments. So, hey everybody. Hey John. Hey Dan. Hey Mike. Thank you for joining us. So.
So he, he said he was good for it, so he did it, and I also had Chris Williams, who I've worked with before. I had been following him through. Not necessarily met him until that same con. Matter of fact, I met all three of them at the same con, which is funny. But I had talked to Chris, a long time before that. He had a Kickstarter for it was a supernatural comic that had a werewolf in it, and this was back in like 2016. I think it was his second issue. He hasn't put out one recently, but I keep pushing him. I'm like, dude, you need to do issue 3.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how the 4 of you got the. You guys were the 4 covers.
Right.
Joseph ended up doing cover for issue 1. And then Carlos, my normal artist, did the other issue 4. And then I had Sean Forney. He did that X-Men variant for issue 2. Just because it made sense because of the theme of that the Days of Future Past lineup with made sense for that scene in issue 2.
Yes.
What I like to call the Carrie Homecoming.
Yes. I really appreciated that throwback cover.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite. Just in general, I keep looking at that and I'm like, it's just having my character in Wolverine's position.
Mm-hmm.
It's as a Wolverine fan growing up, it's like one of those like nerdy moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I had just reread that arc this past winter. I signed up for the Marvel Unlimited app and just like I was just going and mainlining all the stuff that like I was reading in high school, and going back and reading arcs that I knew about, but nobody I knew had the actual copies of the issues. So like that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about a little more. Like we both grew up about in the same era of comics in high school. Jim Lee's X-Men and the end of the New Mutants and and I went back and reread all of that stuff just to kind of just get back in the mood and remind myself. And I don't know. I think you had to leave at the end of before I was getting into it at the party, but I was pulling out all the comics that I drew in high school, and God, you just look at them and you can just see I was just totally trying to channel Jim Lee, and
I think we all did at some point.
Oh, of course we did, and we were both inspired by Wolfsbane, and me, it was like I liked the character, but they never did anything good with her, and I know that in some ways I created Kate before I read New Mutants, but I know that there was a lot of elements of what she became as a character was like a reaction to what they had done with Wolfsbane. It's like, oh man, they just didn't use that character to what they could to do.
What? And I think too, like, because at the time, like, I had Snowpaw she wasn't Snowpaw at the time, but when I first made her, she was just a normal modern day blonde looking girl. Whenever I started developing the characters, but I think for my love of Wolfsbane kind of evolved her into that because I love reading her accent. And I love in general, like the Scottish and Irish accents are my favorite.
They're awesome.
They're like no matter who's talking, I just want to be like, oh, talk some more, please.
Yes.
So and I was very influenced by Chris Claremont's writing because he was very heavy into that.
Yeah.
And Laura Baggart, was Scottish as well. So she was heavily in that. Banshee being Irish, they both each had that thick, accent, and even in the writing, the way because you could read it out loud, and it was just
He was trying to channel the like Robert Burns, the poet. Like he wrote in the Scottish brogue, and so like if you read the poems, like So I like play Scottish music, and like I know a lot of Scots and hang out with a lot of Scots. And so we do a Burns night every year in January, and my favorite moment is the ode to the haggis. They march the haggis out, and then read the Robert Burns poetry in that in the Scots Gaelic, like English, like and yeah. If you've never heard it before and you don't know what they're talking about, it's great.
It's funny, like, because I understand it when I'm hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so
oh yes.
My wife and I, like my wife so much, not so much. So like we started watching Outlander because she heard it was a good series, and for me, like I want to be able to hear that more while I'm writing my Snowpaw spinoff.
Yeah.
So basically, to kind of get that dialogue in my head as I'm writing, I was like, oh yeah, sure, let's watch it. Cool.
Yeah.
And, it's actually funny because like a lot of the stuff that I was learning about to write Snowpaw back in like that, there's a 200-year difference, but of the stuff that I read about, there's a lot of like the Jacobite, uprising, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff that's like, it's funny. I just learned about that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the show,
That's what
so
media is good for sometimes.
Yeah, so not only do I know what's going on, I can understand what they're saying. Where my wife's like, "What do you say? What'd she say?"
Right.
And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll tell you."
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's. I mean, but even like listening to or watching the first couple of seasons of Matt Smith's run on Doctor Who with Amelia Pond and Karen Gillan's character, and she's got that great accent. I'm definitely a sucker for that. I've played around with doing some accents in some of my writing, not so much in PS. I had another short run strip that I did like back in 2001, where I had a character who was Australian, and he just had an incomprehensible accent that I tried to write it out. And, but it's like, you got to find the right balance where it's understandable and you get the point, but not you don't go totally overboard. That's you got to find those little Easter eggs that are fun to write, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And but it's funny too because like I know I could go even heavier with the accent and like the lingo, but like then at that point it's like, all right, well, am I going to lose my audience if I go even thicker? Because even I had to look up what some of the words meant. Right,
exactly, and that gets back to like the Robert Burns poetry. It's like, I need a translation matrix to understand what. I mean, of course, it was written in the 1700s, so that doesn't help. But it's written in dialect, so. Although last night, a friend of I had some friends. We went out for a walk and then came back for like pub food in the backyard around a fire. And my friend, who's a librarian, was talking about this Scottish poet who had rewritten a ode in the wake of the 2016 election. Oh my God. Scottish all over. I'll just leave it at that. It was a lot of fun. But yes. Anyway, but yeah. So yeah, you found all these great artists at conventions. Obviously, like me, I got started back in the late '90s when I first started doing PS and putting it up on the web. And it was going to my local comic show. At the time, I was in Chicago, so I was going to what's now Wizard World Chicago. Oh, yeah, and it was Wizard back then. When I first went in like '93, and it was still the Chicago Comic Con, but now it's all Wizard. But yeah, like I don't know what we're gonna do until conventions start back up, because like conventions are the thing.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how I got like that's I think how my main success with my Kickstarters have been going to Comic-Cons. Because, in 2016, like I had mentioned before, I had that failed one because I didn't have an audience.
Yeah.
I probably would have been fine if I would have just gone for that first issue and the $5,000.
Right, of course.
But but these other ones, like being that much more successful because I have an audience, and it's all because I started going to Comic Cons.
Right.
And and what you and I were supposed to meet at the
the one here in Boston. But
yeah, so
we'll just have to wait till next year or whenever it is whenever it's safe again. But I'm going to be right there. I'm going to be doing the convention scene again. I don't think I'm going to be going back to 20 a year the way I used to, but I think a few a year, and even if Boston doesn't happen, I know I'm going to get down towards Pennsylvania for at least something. So
yeah, I mean, there's several down here. I had 3 lined up. Oh, and I have 3 now. They all moved to next year, so I still have 3. I have Pittsburgh twice, and then I have Erie.
Yeah.
There's 2 different ones in Pittsburgh. One they're like a month apart,
mm-hmm.
And then I have the one in Erie, which is in September.
Yeah, I've done a couple in Pittsburgh in the past. A couple of regular comic shows, and I did the anime show there in 2010, I think it was. So, but yeah, that was one of my stops. It was one of my tour stops. So I need a.
The Pittsburghers, us Yinzers love our comics.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and plus, I don't know if the museum is still there, but you did have that. There was a comics museum there, at least briefly. Maybe it didn't last.
I know there was something. I'm not sure, like if it was a full-on, like I know they had something that was to pop culture, and then they also had the Warhol, and they have
Right. But there was specifically a guy who was like into comics and had started a thing.
I think I heard about that like back in like 2011.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I don't know if it's still. I haven't heard anything since then. So I mean, it could
still be maybe. Yeah, who knows?
But I used to commute down to Pittsburgh for work for my full-time job before I moved up further. So I haven't really been, like that was down. I think it was down in the Strip District is where it was. But that was, like I said, I heard about it because I was down there all the time. But since I left, working in the city down there, I have no idea if it's still there or not.
Who knows?
I lost touch with what was going on with the main city stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been running a new Kickstarter right now for the print collection, and is that what you were gunning for that first time around? Was to do like a whole print collection, or to do it as like all the issues all at once? Or
I think what I would like my first time around when I was doing 1 through 3 was trying to kickstart the series.
Right.
So, because I knew I had 12 issues written at the time, and I still and I've worked on a couple since then. But to get them out faster, my thought was, okay, well, if I could get these 3 out, I can start then doing them faster.
Right.
Basically, kind of getting them, that monthly thing going. Like I had intended to make it into a faster running series, which I still intended to go for. But I mean, it's taken me a little bit to get the snowball effect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's getting started is the hard part. I mean, that's.
That was basically, it was just kickstarting it to get it going.
Right.
Not so much the trade at that time.
Right.
Matter of fact, I didn't really even think about the trade at the time. It was only like recently when some other creators in the community were, basically getting to 3 and 4 and then doing a trade. And I thought, that's actually not a bad idea. But I wanted to take it one step further because I didn't want it to just be the collected editions. I wanted it to also, if I was going to do another Kickstarter for it, I wanted it to be something else.
Yeah.
That's why I added the 16 extra pages with the 4 extra guest writers and the, all the pinup art and then the die-cut hardcover. I wanted it to be something more. I wanted it to be a collector's piece.
Right.
That a fan or audience or Wolfpack members, I call them.
Right.
Would be happy to have, and for me, I'm excited because I can't wait to have that hardcover.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, I always aimed for the graphic novels from the beginning because I wasn't collecting issues anymore. I was only buying books. Right. So I was like, if I can't put it on a shelf, I mean, I figured that other people are going to be in the same, but I feel now that doing the issues is actually a wonderful way to
Yeah,
serialize as a way to build up for that full collection.
exactly. Yeah, and I found that out too, because I was doing the singles, and then I got to issue 3 when I did my first successful campaign. A lot of people approached me and they asked me and they were like, "Are you going to do a trade?" So between the fact that other people were talking about it and they're saying, "Hey, you should do this," and then even the audience was asking for it. To me it was like a no-brainer. I was like,
Oh
I have
yeah.
to do this.
Oh
But
yeah.
like I said, I just didn't want to be a money grab and just repackage and send it out.
Right.
So
Right.
I wanted,
Exactly.
like I said, I had to make it that extra mile to make it worth something.
Right. Exactly. Well, I mean, there's also that sense of the there's a longevity to a trade that issues, even though people save them and put them in bags and put them in a long box somewhere, it's not quite the same that 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road,
Right.
you've got the book. And, so it's, I never really felt that it was really a money grab so much as a different venue entirely.
It is too, and I think for the most part, you have like me. I am mostly a single issue guy.
Right.
So again, I haven't really done a whole lot of single issues within the last several years, except for Kickstarters. Like like with Marvel and DC, I still have I'm like right here on the side of the computer here. I have 4 stacks from at least I think 2012, 2013 that I still haven't read yet.
Right.
And these are all literally I think they're this tall, 4 stacks, and those are all single issues.
Yeah.
So and then I have more. I have other stacks of I've been picking up the indies and just reading them.
Right.
But book wise, they're the older stuff that I didn't get. Like the Dark Phoenix saga, I got the graphic novel for that.
Yeah.
Extinction Agenda, I got the graphic novel for that. Those books, the ones that I didn't have the singles for, I wasn't going to go back and try and find all of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the only experience that I personally have for trades and graphic novels.
Right.
Aside from besides picking up.
Yeah. Whereas I got into it in part. I mean, there was the manga thing, but just in general, having book-length comics, and they've become more prevalent in the last 20 years, obviously. The market has exploded in that way. But
I mean, I've seen people just selling those at cons.
Absolutely. And I've got a lot of friends who they now have book deals, and that's what they're, through First Second and Random House and those venues. And, my work sort of straddles somewhere in between. It's neither entirely, superhero issue stuff, and it's not entirely sort of like the YA graphic novel thing either.
Yeah, we're not, we're kind of that weird gray line between horror and other.
Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, but that's, indie comics rule for that.
Well, that's just it. It's, we get to do what we want regardless of what genre. Really, mine is a mixture of genres, and I'm sure yours is too.
Oh, yeah.
Not just one thing. And I think that's what a lot of people like about it is it's telling a story in multiple streams of genres that cater to every, because if you like one thing, you generally like more than
Yeah.
So I think being able to write and cater to that, a lot of indies have freedom to explore stories like that because they're not being buckled down by one of the publishers saying you have to do it this way.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the publishers, of course, are looking at the wider market. What does the wider market want? What are people buying? The perennial thing with people trying to break in. And John actually had a really good question in the chat that do we go to anything like writers conferences? And I've gone to a couple. I joined the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators a couple years back. Because at the time I was thinking about writing a YA novel, which eventually became a YA graphic novel script, which is out there right now, and one day hope to maybe draw it. But I learned a lot from going and exploring a completely different segment. I'd been really in the comic book realm, and especially indie comics, but then getting to know people who were in like the book publishing side of it. Fewer people in the superhero realm, but still going and like cross pollinating from a lot of different places gives you different insights too. So. I had a point, and maybe I'll circle back to it.
You were saying about how you're going to conferences and
Yeah. Well, it was trying to build off of something that you had said before that. So if it's important, it'll come back to me. So I won't worry about it.
So for me, I didn't necessarily do any conferences for writers or any. A lot of my stuff basically stemmed from like wanting to do it. And then, like, basically a lot of times doing the English classes through, like, I went through high school, did the English classes, and then I did some writing classes in college. Just because, like, I'm a graphic designer, web designer, so I did a lot of art, classes.
Yeah.
But I also went to a 4-year degree college, so I picked up a lot of English major, storytelling and writing and just in general. Like, I did a Shakespeare class. A lot of things. It was basically just I was able to keep up with a lot of like writing methods and stuff while I was also doing art and writing these things at the same time. So keeping what I was taught and as well as kind of applying those at the same time, I think helped in my case. Plus, I know what I like, and whenever there's something epic and big, I always felt like I wanted my world to feel like that.
Right.
Like. I think for me, like a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's amazing how you've already written a world for your mythology for your characters to live in." Because I had that well before I even started finishing the first 12 issues. I had this world that hasn't even been explored in those 12 issues yet. It's kind of opening up in issue 13.
Right.
This world that I've developed, but I have I have gods, I have all kinds of stuff that like. I have already like these backgrounds that I've shared through my emails to my fans. And my back. But people were like, "Oh, it's amazing that you already have this set up." And for me, it was like reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and then watching the movies years later when they were, to me, it was like that was my big like. I started making maps. I started making.
Yeah.
I have my own werewolf language and alphabet. I can't wait to show, when it gets to that point. You know what I mean? And so I have all this stuff, and a lot of it's based on like what I liked, and and what I knew a lot of other people like too. So it's kind of like a mixture of what I learned, what I've seen and experienced, and then so I got to that point where I was like, okay, I'm doing this on my own. I've got the first couple of issues out. And then I joined a community of creators that I didn't even know existed until I saw a Facebook ad for Tyler James's comic books.
Right. Yeah.
And so I started listening to the podcast, and then I got into I got into his pro stuff, and then I joined his mastermind group, which is basically a small group of creators like myself and you, and we get together. It's kind of like Tolkien did. It was like basically a group of people who get together and they critique each other's work.
Mm-hmm.
They help each other with their problems.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you get together like once a month.
Yep.
And you say, "This is my current issue right now.
Mm-hmm.
I need help with it." And then you can when it's somebody else's turn, then you can offer your experience, your help to them as well. So it's basically it's kind of like a book club except for creators.
Yeah, so I'm a part of a couple of groups like that. I have a writers group that I originally joined when I was exploring doing the YA thing, and they continue to be the people who look at my first drafts and they give me feedback, and they actually provide really helpful feedback because they are not in the same genre in some ways, and so they can give me some insights about broadening the appeal, right?
Right. Yeah.
But then I also have we have a regular comics meetup of people who are local. So before COVID hit, we'd actually get together at the local comic shop once a month and hang out and show each other what we're working on. And well, now we're just meeting on Zoom, but eventually,
Yeah.
and there used to be beer involved. There's still beer involved, but
just not together beer.
just not together beer. And but even before, when I was first on the web, even before I printed my first book, I was a part of a group of primary web cartoonists. But I also had a local group of people that I hung out with. It's so key to have other creators to talk to and be able to like bounce your ideas off of each other and show people and say, oh yeah, this is really awesome, this is really great, and I'm kind of confused here, what's going on? And
I mean, and that's kind of what led me to the trade, was like I had been mulling it over. I had talked to Tyler about it before, and then like when I brought it to the mastermind group, my hang up was, how do I make this? I have this idea, but should I save this for the omnibus, collecting the 12 issues because it's such a cool idea, or should I just do it for volume 1, and then maybe? So then when they saw how excited I was about the die cut claw and the vellum werewolf over top of the character, and they're like, just do it, just follow your gut, do it. So I did. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to. And then I thought, I took it one step further. Was like, okay, well now how do I make this? Okay, so this is a great thing for this volume 1, but then how do I take it to the next step for volume 2, volume 3?
Yeah.
Right? So my idea from that spawned this idea of that the under graphic that is where the die click comes through is basically, it's kind of like a stone mural of these werewolves fighting. And so since the idea between this particular breed of werewolf is that they were either born good or they're born bad.
Yeah.
They're always constantly battling with each other.
Right.
And then the idea with Nightwolf is that in between, he's not the same. He's kind of like that modern gray line where morality is not exactly good or bad. It just kind of is.
Right.
So it's not that that you're either this or this. It's kind of that in between.
Right.
And so I have the idea where there's with that volume 1 is depicting that kind of battle between good and evil, and then him clawing through the middle with his face,
right,
kind of breaking that chain. But for volume 2, then I'm going to have an addition. So on the purebred side will be like more like the purebreds coming into that scene, and then Snowpaw underneath the die cut,
right.
In a similar fashion, and then volume 3 will be on the other side with the mongrels coming in to the frame, and then the die cut will be Black Claw, which is my evil werewolf.
Right.
So it's going to be one kind of a collector's piece together once you put all 3 volumes together.
Oh yeah, that'll be cool. That'd be really cool. I mean, the whole idea of the good versus the evil ones was actually something I was playing around with this design. Yes. And I don't know if you remember, I sent you a few thumbnail designs.
Yeah, with the yin and
yang. Playing around with that yin. I thought that was a strong. Yeah, just like
that was a beautiful tie-in.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a strong theme from your work, and thinking through this, I really appreciate that you had done all this world building ahead of time with your story, because right now I'm in the midst of writing what will be volume 3 of Paradigm Shift, and we're actually delving into some of the stuff that's been behind the scenes for those first 2 volumes, and discovering the people behind the experiments and why. And I've got this science fiction veneer over my werewolf mythology, but there's some like bigger questions as why can that violate the laws of physics, and is there a supernatural element? And so there's things that I'm now trying to piece all together, my world building, and fill in a lot of the cracks that I never really went and delved into because I didn't know if I was ever going to get to writing this part of the arc or not. So so I can appreciate that you had done all that work ahead of time, whereas
again, a lot of it too, like a lot of my world building, I think I did a lot of that mostly in college, because at the time I obviously wasn't at the point where I wasn't comfortable with doing the art myself. I can do art myself, but it's not as good as what it is now with Carlos and my other artists.
And I have a similar background. I also have a degree in graphic design and went to an actual 4-year college and took a lot of other things, including writing and English, but also basically computer art anything. So I took like a computer music class. I took like a web design class. I took all the things that I could do creatively with computers. And so when I got out, and then I like did video editing as like a internship, and so mine ended up being like a focus on visual storytelling essentially. And but when I got out, I had this story and I wanted to tell it, and I did have 4 years of figure drawing and I knew how to draw, but even so, I look back at those early pages and realize, even though I had a lot of the technical ability, what I was working on was my artistic vision part, and that's the muscle that I needed to work on more. And you can you see the evolution in the books themselves. So it's a very different thing to like be totally self-starting and say I'm going to do it all, versus you making that hard decision of like, well, I know what I do best. How can I build a team to make my vision a reality?
And that's, I think too, like with me, like I if I would have flexed that muscle more, and if I would have kept going, because there was like, I had really good drawings. I was like, I impressed myself, right? But then like when I try to I do it again with, in a scene or whatever, then it's like it falls apart. So I think for me, like I didn't have the time to continue. If I would have kept going and focused on that, then I probably could have gotten better. But again, like you said, it was focusing. I needed to make that decision on what was best: my storytelling, my world building, or my illustration. Which I knew that I got so far with this. It was enough that I could hand it off to somebody, and they could be like, "Okay, I know what you're asking for." And that's what I was aiming for, because I wanted to make sure the story was right. Because somebody else wasn't going to tell my story, so it had to be. I'm going to, between everything else I had going on. I mean, I was in a band at the time. I was,
was that the one that had the music track for your first Kickstarter?
Yes.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. As you can see, I can appreciate that. You can see my toys on the wall. Exactly. So, I mean, I made my own music for my Kickstarter trailers, so I can appreciate that aspect.
So I mean, like and what was funny is like my band was named after one of my comic book characters.
Oh, cool.
This was the second name of this band, particularly because we had lost a member and decided to get another member, which was one of our friends, and then we just decided to change our name. So as I'm drawing this character, Crimson Dawn, like I'm working on him, and then I was doodling the logo. And we were sitting at my dad's den where I had my art studio set up. So I think this was like my freshman year, or even between freshman and sophomore year of college, when we decided to switch over to this new band. And as I was drawing, everybody's coming up with all these names, and everybody's like, And then finally, like I finished the logo, and I turned it around and I said, "Well, what do you think of Crimson Dawn?" And and then they were like, "Oh, yeah." So I get to ironically tell how like my band was named after my comic books.
That's great. Oh, I think that's awesome. There's a nice synergy there. I keep wondering, like, I love doing my art and I love doing my writing. Although I'm jealous, I kind of wish that I could just do the writing and like have. I mean, I love drawing. Don't get me wrong. It just takes so long. It just takes so damn long.
I know.
That it would be awesome to be able to like work with an artist as well, but at the same time, I have these very specific ideas of what I want to produce too. So,
believe me, when I have usually, so like for the most part, like when I specifically have something envisioned, I am like a dog with a bone. I will not let it go. I'm like, no, it has to be like this. It has, so there's sometimes some pages and scenes will take longer to flush out with the artist. and other times I'm like, nah, you got artist license, go ahead.
Right.
But like they're like issue 3, actually, so issue 2 and 3 were heavily like, no, this is exactly how I want it, frame for frame, because like like a lot of it was very cinematic and with the horror, and then it really was the like where the scene, the buildings had to be this specific layout, because to make it work the way that I had envisioned it, it had to be this specifically, like the school, the way he had to break in to go through the hallway to escape the massacre,
Yeah.
and then go down, and then like him escaping down the staircase. For that scene to work, it had to be that specific type of like spiral stair,
Yeah.
to be able to work that way. And the same with in issue 3, that fight scene in the living room. Those couches had to be laid, like that floor plan of that house had to be laid out exactly like that to be able to go from the foyer into the living room into the open kitchen. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like it all had to like flow to be able to get that fluidity, kind of like that. How like a lot of like TV shows or movies will do that like non-stop camera, like where it follows the action.
Yeah.
So
Single
there
shot.
was a lot of that idea in there. Like it had to flow in that manner. So like I even had to do some rough drawings for the artists to be able to see what, because like they just weren't understanding from the words. Because I work with a lot of Hispanic artists, so like it was being lost in translation. So I literally had to draw like very rough. Okay, here's the couch. Here's the motion of him. Like so, I had to do like kind of like the stick figure, like where you make the pages turn to make it animated looking.
Yeah.
The idea of like where that was going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even as the artist and writer, I remember it was in this, the original second book, which is in the middle of the Volume 1 collection now. There's this giant 30-some page warehouse fight scene. I got so bogged down in that because I was trying to make it understandable, and I was like trying to envision the layout of this warehouse in a way that worked with my script. And I remember going through like this hard 6 months while I was like working on that, trying to like wrap my brain around how all the little pieces put together. And later on, some of my comic creator friends would make fun of me because I had spent so much time on the detail of that. But it was important to me. So, and because of that, I think it read better because of that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes like when you put that extra effort into scenes like that, it pays off. Like, I mean, that's like, and a lot of the way I write my scripts, again, is very cinematic. Mm-hmm. Because like, I envision it, when I'm thinking about it in my head as I'm writing it, is I'm seeing because it's playing out in my head like a movie or a TV show.
Yes, me too.
As I'm writing it. So it's very fluid that way, and I think that's why it plays to the horror theme a lot, because the page turns are like the jump scenes,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think like I've seen a lot of like making of. And those were one of my favorite things to do. Like when DVDs were a thing,
yes.
I loved the extra content, so I would always get like the double, triple discs or whatever if there was like bonus content.
Oh yeah, back to the Lord of the Rings. I got the extended editions. Like get all that extra stuff.
So like I love how like they talk about like where they're like, oh well, this took us weeks to get this 1 5-minute scene,
mm-hmm.
Because they wanted to make sure that it came out right.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that, because like even in illustrating something, if to get that specific point across, it has to flow the way you envision it, or else it's going to fall apart.
Yeah, exactly. I just remember, I think it was the end of Fellowship, in one of the extended things, they were talking about the big fight scene in Moria where all the orcs come in, and they were saying that in the script, they got to that point, we're in that room, and the orcs are breaking down the door, and then the script, it just says, and then they fought like men. And then there's this giant showcase thing. They didn't even bother writing it. They just said, we're going to figure that out on the set, and we're going to hire all the... I mean, hiring fight coordinators. I've got this like kung fu action scene in the first book. We're in this pool hall, and I actually had a friend who knew Wing Chun Kung Fu, and I had a pool table in the basement apartment that I was staying in, and he came over, and I set up a video camera, and he proceeded to beat me up on camera to show me all the moves for all the things in my script, so I could get the moves right. And so, like, to me, it's making my movie. It's totally making my movie. So, like, and like when I'm writing the script, it's exactly as you say. Like, I'm seeing it here in my mind's eye.
Like, you know, if ever somebody wants to film or TV rights to this, I'm gonna be like, I have to have final say.
Right.
Because, like, I'm very anal about, like, especially when it's something like, you know, I know with X-Men and all the big name things, like, there's so much content.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to put all of the, like, you know, things for fans in there without it.
Oh God, Harry Potter. Oh my God, they had to like go through contortions.
Oh yeah. So I think with indies though, it leads you to a little bit more. You can put more of that in there. Like for me, like I wrote it basically as a script that you could easily translate into a season or a movie. You know what I mean? Like
that's kind of what I do too.
Yeah. So I think it you know, there may be a few things that might need retouched or whatever, but I basically could give the script to some producer and they could just roll with what as is.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of my hope. I even write mine in screenplay format. I mean, you do kind of similarly too. I mean, and in film writing, I know that there's an adage that basically one page equals to about a minute of screen time. And I found that a page of script written the same way equates to roughly one page of comic as well. So it's like an easy way for me to kind of gauge how long my book is going to be.
I did a computer animation minor in college, and so I did a lot of storyboarding, and you know, and it's basically, you know, the same as writing a panel like a comic. So it's like if you do it right, you basically have, you know, how it would be laid out, and I think that kind of helped with my writing as well, because I had a practice writing scripts plus having to do the storyboarding and then put it into motion, and you know, so it's having that, I think, helped along with that cinematic feel to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that doing video editing and animation in college was informed by the fact that I'd already done a ton of comics even before college, but having done that experience, like editing a documentary, editing commercials and whatnot, gave me a different sense when I came back to doing comics of like about a cut and about sort of the motion of things. And in some ways, it's like my illustrational abilities had to catch up on what I was wanting to do. So yeah, so it's just fascinating to me how many like little similarities you and I have.
We have it's like almost like looking in a mirror at that point. It's like how much like we both have done very similar stuff, and it kind of makes sense considering like our interests.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know that I know, you know, yes, if anyone out there from Netflix is listening, it would be like a dearest dream of mine to see my characters animated, you know, to see them like as an animated show. Although I wouldn't scoff at a live action version either. And on one hand, I can agree with you as like, oh, I'd love to have creative say and be able to say no, be able to have like that creative veto. But on the other hand, I know that film and TV is a different medium, and so there are some things that I might hold on to that in that medium wouldn't be as important. I would imagine that the characters themselves would be sort of the sacrosanct thing for me. It would be whether or not it would be, are their characters coming across in a way that feels like them, you know, and maybe some of the details of the story could change. Even looking back and rereading it as I was preparing the new editions, I was like going like, oh man, I really probably could have like sped this along or compressed some stuff, or how I fretted over all these details, but did I really need to? I mean, I could imagine going back and doing like a TV version that would change parts of it, but not the bones of the thing. But on the other hand, like I took I did this illustration masterclass thing for like 5 years running, and one of the instructors was Mike Mignola. So I got to hear a lot of stories about what it was like adapting Hellboy and working with Guillermo del Toro, and how the first movie was pretty good, but the second one he had a really hellish time of it. At one point apparently Del Toro said, I mean, this is his story, so I can't, I could be wrong if I heard this wrong, but what I remember hearing was that at one point he went to the director and said, "This isn't Hellboy, what you're doing. This isn't Hellboy." And he said, "Well, maybe you're Hellboy. Not your Hellboy. This is my Hellboy." I'm like, oh! Yeah, but on the other hand, it's like, it's like, you sold it to Hollywood. It's just you're dealing with the devil, so you never know. I mean, on the other, I would love to be able to complain about having that problem.
It's definitely, and I think I would love to do live action, but the problem with that is, I think at this point, is like I haven't seen a werewolf done the way I want to see it done.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that concern. Like, so that's another thing is like, if it's going to be, like, they have to come to me with show me exactly what I want to see before I even, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Like for me, I like doing Kate's werewolf transformation design was as much a reaction to everything I'd seen in media before that I was like, you guys aren't even looking at real wolves. You're not, like the fur patterns and things, or the way the anatomy lines up for the legs. Like I remember watching, oh God, it was execrable. It was, we had American Werewolf in London, and then they did the American Werewolf in Paris.
Yeah.
Oh, it was awful. And I remember the transformation sequence in it, like the big set piece. I mean, they computer animated, and this was the late 90s, and it was bad. But then, like, her, like, legs, like, broke. Like, her, like, femurs broke to, like, create extra knees, because clearly they had no idea how the bone structure of an actual dog works. And I was like, like, no, I'm gonna, when I do this, I know, like, the transformation is gonna be a set piece. It's gotta look good. And so, I mean, I was looking at the greats. I was looking at American Werewolf in London. I was going online. There's this guy, Leo Lobo, he's like a transformation artist who people love. He did a webcomic called Alpha Luna that people in the werewolf community absolutely love. And it's well done. And he like really thought through all this stuff. And I was really inspired by seeing his work. And but also I would hold out as much wildlife photography as I could, and I had a book on comparative anatomy of humans and horses and lions and dogs, and I could look and see how. And thus I have an art book that's got a whole transformation section, because like I was trying to figure it out, and I had years to work on it before I actually got to that point in the comic. But by the time I got there, I knew what I wanted and I could do it. But like that was a design thing.
Yeah, and like I had mentioned to you before, like a lot of my taste, like I knew what I liked, and I didn't see a lot of it in film and a lot of like different things. Like like you said, it didn't look right. And I think my taste catered to, once I saw Werewolf the Apocalypse.
Oh yeah.
I was like, that's exactly what I envision a werewolf to look like.
I gotta bring that out. I gotta bring that out for those who don't know.
Oh, me too.
Where is it?
As we go through into our books. books.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That's the player's handbook. I've got that.
Yep.
That was underneath this one, but yeah, here's the main handbook. Did you get some of the idea for the die cut from this?
No, I didn't even know that existed until I think you mentioned it, to be honest. So, like, the fact that exists is awesome in itself, so now I have to find it.
Yeah.
But number two, like, yeah, so a lot of, like, I think I'm going to see if I can even, like, I think I had a lot of these paid more. Like, I did a lot of, like, drawings from these just in high school. From just in general, like, the anatomy of a lot of how these look. Like, there's specific some of these artists in here that I thought.
Oh yeah, there were lots of great artists in these books.
Oh yeah. But like in general, I think like I have a tattoo on my arm that I basically like saw. Yeah, so this is basically similar to the tattoo that's on my arm.
Oh yeah.
When I was 18.
Yeah.
And because I love the style of how it came out. So that's again, if you can see, you can see.
Aha.
You can see. You see how?
Oh yes. Yeah, I totally see it. Wow.
So like that was
in ink.
Yes, exactly. It is on my body for life. And, there's a lot of these drawings in here that I was like, this is exactly what I want. I'm like, there's like, this is like what I was looking for. So if I had an artist come in, if it wasn't me,
yeah,
doing, like I was like, this is like I would point them to the general, like these pages.
Yeah, you could like, show. I could see the Werewolf the Apocalypse influence from the get go with Nightwolf, and that's a good thing,
That's exactly in my head what it like. That's to me what it looked like even before I knew that Werewolf the Apocalypse existed. And then a friend of mine introduced because I was telling him about my story. This is in high school, and he's like, dude, that sounds. He's like, hold on, and he had his book in his book bag because I guess like that's when him and a couple other guys got together and they played this.
Yeah.
And so like when he brought it to my attention, it blew my mind. Like this is exactly like because having the world building already in my head like swirling, and how I wanted them to not just be because this is exactly what I was telling him. I was like I have this world where werewolves aren't they're not bit. They're they're not,
yeah, exactly.
That way. They're they have their own tribes. They live and this thing. He's like, dude, have you been reading Werewolf the Apocalypse books? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah, he's like, no, seriously. I'm like, no. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. And as soon as he showed me the book, I'm like, oh.
Yeah. And on one hand, you're like, this is amazing, and you're like, damn, it's what he got to it first. But on the other hand, you've done your own thing though with it. So
I know, and I was like, well, this is. I'm like, I wonder if they'll let me write comics about their stuff.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean,
I didn't want to go down the whole IP route. So
right. Yeah. That's a whole. That's a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, licensing somebody else's thing when you're a nobody is
yeah. It's
for me, like I was like, all right, I'm just gonna run with what I've already was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like this actually helps me to be able to show an artist what I want. So it ended up being, it was fun for me to play it, and it gave me like visual. This is what I like to be able to kind of tell artists. And then when I found Carlos, because he had done a bunch of werewolf drawings, I didn't even have to tell him what I wanted. Because I said, you are it. You are what I want.
Right. Yes. That's great. That's so great.
Oh yeah. Because it was a while too. Like I had gone through several tryouts with character designs, basically because I had that specific look.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is basically what I'm asking for. Can you put something together? Let me see what it looks like. If you're a fit, cool. If not, at least we'll be friends. Whatever.
Yeah.
Because I don't. There's great artists out there who are super. Like a lot of the artists too that I approached never drew a werewolf before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a matter of like, okay, I like your art style because I know from a superhero fan, I like specific like the Jim Lee style or Joe Madureira. Like I love that kind of So I would go to guys who look like that because that's the kind of comic book style I
like. Right.
But when you put that style with the Werewolf the Apocalypse werewolves, put that together, and you have Carlos.
Yeah, that's so great.
Right? So that's exactly when I saw his art, I was like, this is exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And that's one of the things I've noticed is that there aren't a lot of artists who either just do comics, and like there are a lot of artists on the internet who, they love anthros, they love transformation, they love werewolves, and so they focus just on that. And there's some really good ones. They're really talented, but that's all they do.
Yeah.
And then there's some incredibly talented comic artists who draw everything, but then you give them a werewolf and they kind of come up with this weird brown thing, and
it looks like your typical werewolf from the Wolfman.
Yeah, or even if they do the bipedal one, there's sort of a genericness to it. I mean, even if it's well done. I mean, even like Mignola, he had some interesting werewolves, but that wouldn't be the style that I would go for. So finding somebody who kind of could take those two things and put them together. I mean, and for me, anything that I choose to draw, I want to do it well. So, I put in the effort. If I don't know how to draw it, then I'll learn how. But, and I love my werewolf Kate, so I want to make sure that she looks awesome when I draw her. But on the other hand, like that, I got the weird hair thing. Oh my God, the hair. It's a whole digression. But yeah, so I think it's awesome that you were able to find somebody who could do all of the things and make your comic what you're aiming for.
Yeah, and it became kind of like a catch-22 because when he basically, we got to the point where we had 6 pages done and then the character designs all done. He dropped out of the project.
Right.
And I was like, ah!
Yeah, that's frustrating.
Somebody similar, which I did with Bakuman Studio. Oscar was close.
Yeah.
It was close enough for me to proceed.
Right, exactly. Especially if he was working off of the stuff that Carlos had done.
Exactly. So basically, Carlos had all 24 pages sketched out, and luckily, the pages that I gave those sketches over to Oscar, and all the character designs and everything. I'm like, this is what I want. Mimic this as much as you can with your style, but the werewolves have to be like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, he's very good artist. I love working with him. But then I found out in issue 3 he was starting to hand off to an underling, so it wasn't even him.
Right.
So the style started to change, and I was in a crunch. So I was I don't have time to argue this. I need it now.
Right.
What I mean? So I was like, all right, let's just roll with it. And then I got it. I had a lot of back and forth to kind of get it. It was like I said, that was where I was like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And it was like, come on.
Yeah.
That's when I had the idea after issue 3 was done. I was like, you know what, I'm going to approach Carlos and just see where he is in life right now. At the time, he had left to work for one of those, it wasn't Magic the Gathering.
Right, but it was another card game type thing.
Yeah. Like some other fantasy monster cards, which, again, love the art. I can't, his art is so gorgeous.
Yeah, well, it's hard when you're an illustrator and you get a gig like that. It's hard to turn that down.
Exactly. So I approached him. I said, "Hey, how much would it take to get you back on this project? Are you available?" And
right.
Turns out that he had a full-time 9-to-5 kind of job, and he was able to do this for me.
Right.
At a reasonable price after hours. So,
right.
Which is great. I was super stoked, and then he got so involved in issue 4 that he was offering up advice. He's like, "Oh, this is how we can make this better, this and that." And so he got invested, and now with Snowpaw coming up, I was telling him about my spinoff idea.
Yeah.
And he's like, I have to do this. And I'm like, okay. So he is all in for Nightwolf and Snowpaw, which I'm totally fine with, like, because I was so worried about having to find somebody else who draws werewolves.
Yeah. Because it's tough to find that intersection.
Exactly, and and there's a lot of artists that some of those artists that I had tried out, I'll probably go back to and see if they want to do one of my other titles, because those are lean more towards the superhero style.
Yeah. Because you've got that superhero thing and the supernatural thing.
And that's why, like, I have to, but specifically, I have a specific taste for the werewolves, and that's why that made it so much. It took so much time to get somebody to find, and the fact that he's invested now it's so it makes me so happy, and I've told him, I'm like, I'm so happy.
Yeah, no, it's so great that you found, you lost, you refound.
Right?
It's a whole arc there.
It's what they say: if you love them, let them go.
Yes. No, I love it when there's a story behind the story, right?
Right, yeah. But the behind-the-scenes drama behind the
drama. Right. Well, you know what they say in acting: where there's drama, there's drama.
It's true. Oof.
Yeah. So I'm seeing that it's 7:40, and I don't know if you've had a hard cutoff or not, but.
I mean, it's up to you. If you want to keep going.
No, I'm game. So far, Zoom hasn't cut out on us. So
8 o'clock is my cutoff.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go for a little longer, and we'll. But yeah, that's super cool. So you were working on all this through college and coming up with all your backstory and stuff, and I had a slightly different route where I had done a ton of comics in high school. I had my characters. They weren't from Werewolf the Apocalypse. They were from Heroes Unlimited, and my friends and I started coming up with ideas for all the characters that we were creating. And I kind of spearheaded it by starting by drawing a couple of pages with Kate as sort of a protagonist. And in fact, those early issues had a similar arc as the first story arc of Paradigm Shift, much less complex, but I loved the idea of a character who didn't know she had powers, who was kind of a werewolf character, who was a detective, who started investigating murders, and then ultimately discovered that she was the one doing them. That was sort of one of the premises of Kate almost from day one.
Yeah.
And of course, then I started showing these pages to my friends, and then they were like, "Oh, this is great. Well, what about these other characters?" And so the next thing we knew, we had this X-Men-ish super team. And so I drew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like 6 issues worth of stuff. I mean, I only inked one of them, but I penciled 6 issues. And I ended up handing the writing off to a friend, and he was writing the scripts, and so I literally have a stack of stuff that I drew in high school, and I went around to portfolio reviews when I was a senior, and I actually got a scholarship to the place that I went, Millikan University. They had an art talent scholarship. I also ended up playing in the orchestra because I played violin, so I paid for a good chunk of my tuition through my art talent stuff, which is to this day I'm like, wow, that's a lot less student debt that I ended up having.
Yeah.
But I stopped drawing comics. I got this accepted, and I went to my first comics show in 1993. Drove up to Chicago from St. Louis and went to the Chicago Comic-Con and took my stuff to the portfolio reviews, and here I am, this 18-year-old with my portfolio, and admittedly it was pretty good for an 18-year-old, but I look back on it and go, yeah, there's stuff I needed to work on, but I mean, it got all the same stuff you hear all the time. Work on your anatomy, work on your storytelling, all the same stuff. You know the drill. But I was crushed. My little 18-year-old ego couldn't take it, and I didn't draw a single comic for college at all, none. And it wasn't until I got out of school and I was working my day job in Chicago, taking the train downtown every day, and I was bored out of my mind. And Kate and Mike had stuck with me through all those years, and I drawn them, and I kept role playing. I did tons of role playing games in college, but I didn't play Kate. Like, I played her in high school, but I didn't play her at all in college, and so I kept accumulating this backstory. And eventually, I was on the train, and I just started writing it down, and I knew suddenly I lived in Chicago. I needed to have it take place there. And there was a movie, I don't know, it's from the 80s, starring Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines called Running Scared. It's just a archetypal buddy cop action comedy. It's like it just nails the genre. And it's all set in Chicago, and I remember I'd watched that in college and gone, that's a fun movie, and then suddenly I'm here in Chicago. I'm like, oh, you're really cool. And so instead of in college having come up with like all the world building, what I had done is come up with all this backstory. And at the time, the X-Files was huge, and I was a big fan of the X-Files, and I was like, ooh, like an X-Files-y thing, and I'll make it manga, and I'll resurrect these characters and basically tell their origin story and run with that. And so what I had really solid was the characters. And I had this like backstory, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with that, but I hadn't spent all that time on the world building aspect so much, because I was sort of ramping up off of the role-playing games, which were all modern day powers. I mean, we were using the Palladium system, which was just all over the map. We had superheroes, we had martial artists and spies and mutant animals and supernatural shit. And it was just everything. Everything in the kitchen sink was in this world. So I didn't really worry about the world building so much. I was just going to focus on these characters' story. But now I'm like, I really need to earn this title. I've got this big title, Paradigm Shift. It is a big title, right? So now I got to earn it. So like that's what I'm working with now. How do I really? I mean, it always worked. I mean, it's a story about change. It's a story that, I mean, literally changes genre as it goes. Like it was a very deliberately chosen title, but at the same time, like walking with a series called that, you're kind of wanting the world to get upended by the end. So so that's what I'm working on now, making sure I earn that title.
Oh, which is good. I think too. Like for me, like I didn't really understand the need to do the world building because like I've talked to you about this too. Like when I first started writing, a lot of it was fan fiction for the X-Men. Mm-hmm. And so like when I got that nice rejection letter from Marvel, I ended up taking that and rolling with. I took my characters and kind of reworked them. And then started, like, so I remember being on vacation with my family and being the only, like, my two sisters didn't go. So I was with my parents and my grandparents on vacation, and I was the only kid. So I basically took a journal that I got, like, from American Eagle or whatever, when I was a teenager. And I remember being 17 and I knew the characters I had already drawn. I knew their backstory. So I just started writing in this journal. I just started, writing the script, the panels, or whatever. And I had probably the first 3 issues done for that time period because it's evolved since then.
Oh God, yes, yes, I know exactly I know exactly what you mean.
But in that journal, like I had that much written out, and then I typed it up in my word processor, which was before Microsoft Word came along. I think I had the DOS. Yep. The screen.
Yep, text only.
Yeah.
It wasn't word perfect, was it?
Yeah, I think it might have been. It may well have been.
Just a blue screen. And
just a blue screen with the white letters.
Yes. Yeah.
But I had a lot of those that I. So then I had basically when word came out, I had to kind of reword it. And while I did, and I again, it was one of those things that kind of grew up with me. But then, so going into college with this partial story already done, I'm like, okay, and then having been introduced into the world of World of the Apocalypse, and then Dungeons and Dragons, which I had known about Dungeons and Dragons. Right?
Yeah.
Never got to do it until I was like, oh, well, now that I have this little taste, So I picked up the player's guide and the characters and stuff and the deities, and I'm like, I'm like, you know what? I'm like they have these world building books. They don't even have stories.
Mm-hmm. It's just world building. It's just nothing but world building.
Exactly. So I was between that in high school when I first started doing the map building and stuff like that. I had that from that Tolkien experience, but then that world building so it was I was leaving high school, going into college. I had all this. In between classes, I didn't really do much my freshman year except for school and my side stuff. It wasn't until my sophomore year that I think I had friends that I was going out.
Right.
So most of my stuff I think was developed in that freshman year when I was stuck in my dorm because I didn't have a car at the time. Right.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in college playing role-playing games, and then eventually we formed an anime club. Because I had a friend who, over the summer, he worked at a video shop, and he would bring back these boxes of samples, just nothing but anime, and we would have our showings. But I didn't work on any of my own stuff. I just did school, and I played games, and I had my friends, which was great. But it wasn't until I got out of school that I got bored and started doing what you did freshman year. That was my first year in Chicago where I didn't really know anybody, and I was commuting every day and going home and playing PlayStation games and going there's got to be more to life than this.
Well, it's funny too because once I got out of college and then then I had my first son and then I was going back to college because I went after I left Edinburgh with my bachelor's degree in graphic design. I then went to a year diplomacy at the Art Institute in Pittsburgh for the web design. It was basically 1 year straight, no breaks. By the time my oldest son was born, and so I was working full time, going to night classes, coming home, and I was driving an hour. So I was driving 45 minutes to work, and then another half hour to Pittsburgh, just to kind of break it up.
Yeah, and
then I drive all the way home that night.
Yeah.
So I remember that was a rough year, for me. But after I got through all that, it was okay, and I still would dabble in my stuff, but it was I had so much going on between my band, between going, doing life stuff.
Yeah.
I still, like I said, I'd still sprinkle little things in there, reworking. Finally got to the point where I had a full-time job. Both my boys were fairly young, and but they were at the point where they were able to play with each other, and so I remember them playing with their toys or whatever, and then occasionally would sit with my laptop and just kind of plug away when I had a minute, and then just stuff like that. It kind of got to the point where I was okay, now I have my first 12 issues completely written, completely done. And then they said it was all right, now let's get to the point where I'm all right, let's try and do something with it, right? That's when I was okay. Now I'm looking for an artist,
right?
So that's kind of where I got to the point where I was I'm able now to actually move forward because I'm comfortable. Everything is the way I want it to be, and my editor's cool with it. Let's find an artist.
Yeah.
That took longer than I wanted.
Yeah, but everything takes longer than you want, right? I mean, but you got over that hurdle. I was writing in my email list this morning to remind everybody that this thing was happening, and I was you'd think the hardest thing about the Kickstarter is running the thing or even planning the thing, but really no, that hardest thing to do is just to hit the go button. And getting the courage up and not knowing what's going to happen after you jump off that cliff. And
well, that's like once you press the button, like you can't just let it sit and expect it to do its own thing.
mm-hmm.
Like you like people don't understand this. They think that like once you do a Kickstarter, that's it. Kickstarter will do all the work for you. It is not the case whatsoever. Like
No.
like we do these live things. We send emails. We're constantly on social media. Like
yeah,
we're our own marketers, especially being like the writers and owners of these great works. We have to put it out there because no one else is going to do it.
Yep.
Even if you work with a publisher,
yep.
let's say if Image would have picked me up, guess who still has to sell it?
Yep, exactly.
They'll put it up. They'll put it in. They'll get you into Diamond.
Yeah, they'll get you into stores, and you get into previews, but
you still have to promote your book.
Right, exactly. I mean,
So,
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of effort.
Yes, it is. And I remember last year, before I did my launch, I really had no idea. It had been like I had a good run for 10 years running PS as a webcomic, and I built up a decent following, and I'd sold a fair amount of books. I had published 3 books. I had gone to conventions. I'd done the convention circuit. I had a fair amount of audience. And then in 2013, kind of everything crashed and burned, and I lost it all. I wasn't able to work for like a year, and by the time I was out of the other end of that year, I wasn't sure if I wanted to work on comics anymore, because I had kind of had this like really life-altering experience involving a repetitive stress injury, which had made me not be able to draw for a long time. And I knew how grueling it could be. So by the time I was ready to, I had half a book done. I spent like 2016, 2017 finishing the book. Well, I guess it was finished again totally in 18, but finished another book, and I was finally starting to put my feelers out in the world, but I had, minuscule numbers, I did not have a social media following. I did not have. I had a small but good, mailing list. It's not much bigger now, but still, I've got one. I had a mail. I started one. Yeah, exactly. I really, when I hit that go button, I had all I knew was that I had set my targets low enough that I knew I could probably make the 5,000, even though I was planning on printing probably about $10,000 worth of book. I knew that I could pony up the rest if I needed to, but that first 5,000 was sort of the important mark. I honestly did not expect the experience that I got. I mean, I had been like teasing it on email. I'd been teasing it on the social media feeds that I had. Like I'm back on Twitter fairly regularly now, but a year ago, I before I started the Kickstarter, I was barely on it. I hadn't really touched it in years.
Yeah, and I had never like heard about your book until like Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So that goes to show you like when you find something that you like that. Like I think you had your returning people.
Yeah, that was the thing. I had so many people come back from the past who remembered me that I wasn't counting on.
Jumping in like, ooh, this is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. But
like literally, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, back it. And then I was like, hey, by the way.
And I'm grateful. I'm grateful you did, and grateful to everyone else who did too. I mean, I really did not. I thought I can get 100 people to give me $50. That seems like a reasonable ask to do it in a month, right? I know 100 people.
Yeah.
But I got I had such an outpouring that I just didn't know, and I guess that was what that putting 10 years, 10 years plus in the past had helped, and now I'm looking to do something like what you're doing. And I'm going to put out the next one as a 10-issue miniseries. So And I'm already over half. Well, I'm over halfway through the first draft. Not quite at the halfway point on the actual writing because I'm going to go back and do another pass with my writing group.
But hey, it's almost 8.
Yeah. So.
To bed. It's been great talking with you. I'd love to definitely do this again, especially when you're ready to launch too. Like I definitely want to be there to support you. Hell, I would like to do this on a regular basis.
Yeah, this is great. I love doing stuff like this. This is fun.
So just anybody who's watching who hasn't backed the campaign yet, it is still live until tomorrow night. If you want to do the short link, it's LoneWolfComics.com/Nightwolf.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, and please back Nightwolf. It's good stuff, and especially if you love werewolves. So.
Thank you again. I appreciate you doing this and having me on.
Oh, this was. I'm so glad that we had a chance because 10 minutes was not enough.
Definitely not. No, it's still, even like an hour and a half wasn't enough.
Yeah. We'll do it again. All right.
Sure.
Thank you again, Rob. All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.